Police and polite paper products, hand sanitizer. He's not back yet. He'll be right back. Well, I just expanded. I bought another territory. The person that was north of Boston and New Hampshire wanted to sell out, so he financed it, and I'll pay him over the next 10 years.
That's nice.
Is that Jamie? It being 7:03. It being 7:03, I'll call the tonight's meeting of the Finance Committee to order. If you're sitting at home watching on television, the call-in phone number is 1-929-205-6099. That's 1-929-205-6099. First order of business is public comments. Do we have anyone from the public here? It looks like all employees here. Anybody on Zoom, Jamie?
Nope.
Approval of minutes. We have 4 minutes, December 7th, executive session, January 11th, and February 8th. I move that we accept them all en masse.
Second.
George,
Yes.
Natalie,
Yes.
Stephanie,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Chenna,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
and Nicole is yes.
Pass unanimous. Mr. Town Administrator, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and through you to the Finance Committee and those watching on Zoom land and at home. Tonight kicks off, as everybody knows, the FY24 budget hearings for the Finance Committee. I'm just going to go through a few slides, Mr. Chairman. I've been told that a lot of our budget documents are long. People want a Cliff Notes version. I am still working my tail off to try to figure out what the right Cliff Notes might be. So I thought I would put together a few slides that went through the revenue projections for the year. And then I'm going to put up a couple of slides to look at some of the highlights of the expenditures. And then, as we usually do, Mr. Chairman, go through basically line item by line item of each department head. So I'm just going to kick it off. I just want to note to the folks on a lot of the slides, you're going to see information that have franklinma.gov on it. If you're watching at home, you can go right to the home page right here, go down to town budget, click on that button. As you can see, there's more than enough material here for Sunday morning readings, to fall asleep. You could read to your heart's content. We have a lot of information on there, but I'm going to try to do my best I can here in a very short amount of time so we can get to the departments just to dive right in. So one of the first things folks will see on the budget document in the town narrative as well as the budget book is our revenue projections. And I know, Mr. Chairman, the Finance Committee held a session probably a year ago on a deep dive series of just revenue. But I do want to highlight a few things and go through it just so that the new audience members who may be watching at home, we've got a lot of residents that are looking at the budget and hearing about it for the first time. So I just want to make sure everybody understands fully, as simply as possible, where the revenue projections are coming from. So up here on the screen, the first revenue source that everybody knows. And again, if you're looking at home, go to the budget documents. There's a lot of pie charts and a lot of other things to break this up. But the first revenue source is property taxes. And that's, in our language, is your tax levy. So really, it's pretty simple. If folks go up to the tax levy category, which is the first page of the budget, you'll notice in final FY23 it was about 86 million. And then we just times it by 2.5. For everybody out there that wants to know, this is the infamous Proposition 2.5 that's allowed by law. Some folks may hear of, quote unquote, an unused levy. capacity, the town of Franklin does not have any unused levy. The town has been taxing at 2.5%, at least during all of Jeff Nutting's tenure, as well as my own. Then the second revenue source that defines your tax levy is called new growth, which is accumulated by this gentleman behind me, Mr. Kevin Doyle, and the Board of Assessors. So new growth is property value that's captured mid-year. And for the folks at home, it can be construction, but it's also mostly home renovations, home improvements. So if you, in the middle of a fiscal year, did a huge home improvement that wasn't captured on your last reevaluation cycle, you add a kitchen or a deck or some other major capital improvement to your personal property, your property now is worth more money and is more valuable, and therefore in the mid-cycle we have a revenue source called new growth. And what folks will see up here is you'll see a revenue decline. And that's because the town uses, like many communities, a 10-year average of new growth. Why do we use a 10-year average? Because this revenue source can go spike up and can go down. In the budget document, I think we have a 20 to 25-year history in there, and you'll see that some years new growth was at 600,000, 700,000 in revenue. And just before the pandemic, the town did have record-breaking new growth numbers. We are starting to see, because of mortgage and interest rates and a lot of other global factors, that slightly coming down. Make no mistake, the $1.27 million is a $30,000 decrease in the tax levy that we expect. And I will sit here tonight and say, given the global economic conditions, we could meet those numbers, but obviously anything can happen, and based on the mortgage rates, interest rates, issues that we're seeing, and a lot of, obviously with supply chain issues and costs going way up because of inflation, some homeowners and some construction, commercial industrial, we may see that dry up a little bit. So even though this is a 10-year average, on the staff level, we do think that this is even potentially a little high. But the Board of Assessors and Kevin and his staff do a phenomenal job, and we know that they'll do their best to go out and be able to capture that, which leaves a net gross of 3.451. So you can't just automatically do 2.5, 2.5, 2.5, 2.5, 2.5 every year. That will gauge you, but for those that are just doing quick math at home, there are other revenue calculations that come into this. This looks pretty similar to the slide I just have up, but if you notice, the circle is a little lower on the chart over here. So if you look at the second section of the revenue sheet, you'll see something called debt exclusions. And debt exclusions are mainly used to fund a large capital project like a building, in particular, as you can see here, all schools, which is pretty frequent. But you notice over here, you'll see the revenue decline for most of these accounts. And why is that? Because these schools were passed on a debt exclusion well over 20 years ago. They were on 20-year borrowing schedules. And now some of the tax is actually sunsetting off of those projects. So most people wouldn't normally think of this because the tax rate continues to go in one direction with the home value equation that the Board of Assessors do at the tax rate hearing. But it is important to note that actually there is a formula that the finance team uses to actually decrease and sunset that tax. You won't necessarily see it because it comes off year to year. But when you see Horace Mann here of a revenue decline of 96,000, that's because that project is now being paid off. And so now the tax capacity is actually less. And so when you actually do the entire formula and you don't just do 2.5% over last year, and you look at it a little deeper, you actually come away with smaller levy capacity and property tax value that we're getting times the 2.5%, which equals to about 3.31 million. So ultimately, after we go through the final two revenue sources of local receipts as well as state aid, the town really has about 3.31 million to spread around. It's a lot more complicated than that. I'm just simply trying to make the numbers a little bit easier for people at home to understand, as I've gotten a lot of questions in the last couple months about revenues and where they go and whatnot. I will also mention, Mr. Chairman, through the Finance Committee, there will be some additional slides that I'm going to go through at the end during the final recommendation relative to some of these other dynamics, but I'm just going to go through the basics of the budget right now. The second big category is local receipts, and these are generally revenues that pay fee for service, such as building permits, recreation fees, licensing fees, ambulance receipts. These are very similar to school revolving accounts that people are familiar with, athletic fees or something like that. The one difference between them is that local receipts needs to be appropriated by the legislative body during the budget hearing, whereas the school committee and the superintendent have authority over school revolving accounts. But they just do that to illustrate the point that they're similar in the sense that most local receipts are generated by actual fees for service. So this is where alcohol licensing goes. And again, in the budget, for people looking for a little bit more detail, go dig into the budget narrative. We have historical charts, we have historical data, we have a breakdown of what our assumptions are in terms of hotel tax and cannabis fees and all the other fees that are in there, including motor vehicle excise. But I just put this up on the screen to illustrate, again, while we're proposing $12.6 million that we're going to raise in FY24 in local receipts, I also want to mention, the finance director and I have talked about this, we're now in the post-pandemic world of hopefully our local receipts and revenue sources, particularly from hotels, meals, and some of the excise taxes come back and bounce back to pre-pandemic levels. We do believe that will happen. Obviously, global economics may change that. But again, like the earlier slide, even if we're that strong, the host community agreements, there is no more impact fee. So there's actually technically a reduction in what our prospective revenue is because we are technically losing a little bit of revenue. So hopefully this number goes up there, but when you look at the ballpark increase, you have to deduct these other two revenue sources that were in there in FY23. And really there's only a net gain of 1.6 million potentially. And just for the public at home listening, these are revenue sources that we're projecting out. We haven't collected these yet. So just like your household, you know, we're hoping all of these come in. We're confident these are going to come in. But obviously by the end of the year, we have to watch and how things go. They may not come in, or we could be higher than that. And if they're higher than this amount, that's what amounts to some, not all, but some of the free cash. I would note really quickly, while the host community agreement fees, impact fees only are gone, the J&J opioid settlement also is now that revenue for the next 20 years has been created in a stabilization account, which can only be used for those uses allowed under that settlement. So while the money is still there for the opioid settlement, and we will deal with that off budget, the net gain is really about, over last year, 1.6. Yeah?
Just a question. When you project $2 million,
Yeah.
are you an optimist or a pessimist?
A realist.
Do you take that, is that a
Is there a third
conservative?
choice? A realist? No?
Is that a conservative number? Do you
Probably
err on the
ambitious.
side of conservatism versus optimism? I guess?
To be
I mean, we'd
completely
all like
to be
to say
completely honest, you have to be somewhat realistic, right? And you have to look at the upward trend. And I think if you look at particularly a few of the revenue sources, like motor vehicle excise, right? Cars are hard to buy these days. They're expensive. So people may not be purchasing new automobiles like they used to, which means maybe that flatlines. I talk to the hotels usually once a year and get their prospectus, just a little bit of where their occupancy rates are. It seems like we're in good shape. You know, I mean, will it be the same? I don't know. Typically what we find is most of our local receipts in previous years, especially the pandemic years, maybe exceeded a little bit of what we thought. And again, that ends up going to the capital program through free cash. But obviously there's no crystal ball. I'm not a pessimist nor an optimist. Somewhere in the middle is a realist. The finance director and I and the staff look at those. We look at the trends. All the historical data is there. I guess maybe if I was leaning one direction, I'm hopeful. Because if you're hopeful, you're hoping that people are still moving their renovation goals forward at their personal property. You're hopeful that the planning board who's meeting upstairs is approving projects and mitigating projects appropriately, which is good for these revenue sources. I think when we get to the recreation department, I'm very optimistic because Ryan has had record-breaking months over the last year. So there's a lot of good information, and there's some information like motor vehicle excise that maybe that's plateaued, but truth be told, a lot of it's based on human behavior. And not sure whether to be optimistic or pessimistic with that, Mr. Chairman. Leave that up to you guys.
Jamie, just a note for you, there's a couple people in the waiting room.
Oh. Thanks, Natalie. And then really quickly on other available funds, as you can see, there are no transfers, but if there were one-time revenues, like if you went back to 2019-20 in the revenue sheet, you would see the budget stabilization, those 2 years where the budget stabilization votes came in. Those were one-time revenues. It's the same thing with indirects from enterprise funds. Basically, that's offsetting some of the costs for healthcare and some of the other issues in the budget. So those are just one-time revenue sources that you would transfer in there. If we used federal stimulus funds to patch up the budget, that's where that would go. The town has not used any federal stimulus funds to plug its operating budget, like the city of Boston, I know recently has shown that they're using hundreds of millions of dollars to plug their operating budget from federal stimulus. We don't do that, okay? Only in emergencies, that's why you have a rainy day fund. So don't look too deep into those funds right there. Those numbers would jump off if there was a net budget stabilization or other transfers, you'd see them there in the line item. And then finally, local aid, or state aid, excuse me. Again, one of the misnomers of this is it's all about Chapter 70. We hear about Chapter 70 in the news. We hear about Chapter 70 from our legislative delegation. If you look just at Chapter 70 and you look at the amount, you think, oh, there's a net plus there. But ultimately, we use something called a cherry sheet. I've created a link down there, and these slides will be up online later. I know all of you are familiar with it, but for the folks at home, the cherry sheet is basically your summary sheet of all state formulas and assessments. This is the piece sometimes folks don't always go to on the bottom of the revenue sheet, which is assessments. So there are deductions that come off of our full state aid amount. It's not just Chapter 70, albeit that may be the place that people want to focus on because it's where the education aid is. But ultimately, when you get out to it, people see an increase in Chapter 70 and think that that's good, but ultimately, in this budget proposal before you, there's actually a net loss in state local aid of $9,667 in Governor Healy's House 1 budget. So that's a trivia question most people don't get because, and I highlighted one of them here that jumps off the page, is the charter school assessment. Okay, and there's other state assessments for MAPC and mosquito control. There's a whole series of them that get baked into these formulas, and they put out what's called a cherry sheet with exactly these categories. But this is why it's important, because you may get a revenue reimbursement up here for charter schools, okay, 147, but you can't just look at that isolated. You have to look at the assessment as well, okay? So ultimately, there's more per pupil cost leaving the town of Franklin for the charter school than what the reimbursement plugs in the state formula. And again, none of this is local discretion. This is just the way it is. This is the way the state formulas work. If anybody wants any changes in all this, you need legislative approval through the House and Senate and the governor. As I mentioned down here, and I know we'll talk about quite a bit throughout the rest of the week, the House of Representatives has actually approved a budget last 2 weeks ago that does bring Franklin into the positive. And I anticipate by the time all the state aid is done between the Senate budget, conference committee, governor vetoes, sometime in July or August, the town of Franklin hopes to see a net increase in state aid of about $250,000 to $300,000. We'll get to that later on. Really quickly, expenditures. Again, for everybody at home, I'm going to go through these slides really quickly, but all of this information and how the revenue is divvied up by expenditure, including all those revenue sources, is in the budget narrative. Just for the slides, all this is in the budget document. The general government up at the top increased probably more than any other budget. As we'll hear tonight, inflation is now completely settled into the budget. And then two, on public safety, I just note that is for police, not just police and fire, but it's also regional dispatch as well as the building department and animal control. And then third, the education line item here at $74 million does include the Tri-County and Norfolk Agricultural School assessments. What is not included in that number is approximately probably 16 to 17 million. We have the number that was up here in the budget, but when we deduct Norfolk County and Aggie off of that, you're talking about 16 to 17 million in costs that are in the town budget, if you will, that are not in that legislation line item that actually goes to the schools. And again, we'll go through that. I'm sure there'll be some questions on that. Custodial services, facilities, teacher retirement insurance, a whole variety, debt and interest on the buildings. All of that is not included in the education line item. Those are in the other budgets throughout. This is just a quick pie chart of exactly what was there. Again, just to show the folks watching at home or on Zoom, you can go through the narrative and see a lot more pie charts on town demographics, age data, local finance histories, all sorts of breakups, department by department. Just pie charts and simple graphics like this you can find throughout the whole narrative. One of the couple things we're going to talk about tonight is fixed costs. Okay? People say, where's all the money? Why don't we have more? We can't do more of what we want. Well, when you really look at fixed costs, and I know Mr. Nutting talked about this for years as well, this is just some examples. This isn't every one. You have to go through the budget document to really read through it. But just a few examples this year. The pension and benefits budget went up $582,000. That's actually really good. Our IAC works really well. We'll hear about that from HR and in the benefits section. We found ways, working with the schools and the town for our employees, for a high deductible health insurance plan, which has stemmed that cost significantly. But still, almost $600,000 right out of the gate is going to pension and health care. And that's with no effort or very little effort in terms of dealing with health care. But with pension assessment, it's almost $350,000. That's actually cheap as well. If you look into the budget, you'll see over the last decade or so, our pension assessment is nearly doubled. So these are fixed costs. The municipal employees' cost of living adjustment was at 2.5%. We just went through Prop 2.5. So the council and the town administrator basically said, we can raise the cost of living adjustment for all municipal employees. That's a $560,000 cost contractually right out of the gate. Inflation this year, when we go through facilities, you're talking about $1 million right out of the gate just to keep the lights on in this building, the fire department, police department, all the school buildings. $1 million. So you can see how that 3.3 million is going down real quick. The facilities budget alone, just for illustration, is $1 million increase, just from inflationary costs with stormwater, electricity, gas, propane, and the municipal COLA. And again, like I mentioned earlier, people always ask me, what does this stuff pay for? You're looking at 17 to 19 million in non-public education line item spending. You're talking about debt and interest, property and casualty insurance, workers' comp, snow removal, grounds and maintenance, utilities, all the stuff is up here. People understand that stuff. All that stuff is inflected by inflation. And then some of the smaller things in the budget that don't get a lot of prime time because they're smaller costs, but again, fixed costs. Property and casualty and workers' comp insurance this year went up over $100,000. That's just something we have to do. It's just part of what we do. OPEB, we all know the town policy goes up $50,000 every year. Again, it's just another $50,000 to come right off the top, right out of the gate. And regional dispatch, which I'm sure we'll talk more about, is seeing a $350,000 increase. I know all of you on the finance committee have heard this, over and over again. But as we get closer to FY25, we're going to be taking on the full assessment. And so some of that capacity we're able to spend money in the past. Well, once FY26 and 27 comes, you're going to see that assessment going up 2.5%, 3.5% a year, just to pay for regional dispatch. So I just use these as examples. These aren't all of them. I hope I didn't scare anybody totally already, but this is not all of them. But I just illustrate this for the folks watching at home and they're new to this, that this is just like your household. Just like all of you are going through with inflation, we're going through the same thing. It's not just eggs and milk. There's a lot of other things just to keep the lights on that are impacting the town budget. Just going to go through it again. This is most, if not all of them, but the new discretionary spending. People are going to go through the budget and say, where's all the new spending? Well, this is the discretionary non-contractual or obligatory spending. It's about $700,000. So there's been requests this year to put the capital program, curriculum, turnout gear, tasers, all the stuff for fire and police, as well as the schools. We've had this conversation with the finance committee for years. What about Chromebooks? Why can't the schools afford Chromebooks in their budget? We buy them every year, right? So they're reoccurring costs. We pay for them, as you've already seen. It's pretty tough to afford that within a tax levy of $3.5 million with all the other fixed costs. But in the budget model this year, there's $116,000 to, again, illustrate to the public the challenges and the competing demands of about $120,000 in turnout gear. There's 4 additional police officers that have been put in. As you'll hear from the chief on Thursday night, we haven't had one single police officer added to our roster in 23 years. For those, again, we can talk about it tonight when the senior center comes up. I think many of you, some of you are familiar at least. We lost the van 6-7 years ago when an agreement with Medway faltered to use their van, and eventually it's become, it's been a priority for many, many years to buy a new van for the senior center. The budget includes a half a year van driver and an administrative assistant to help coordinate those bus trips, those medical appointments, and those field trips. Additionally, discretionary spending this year, we added a $25,000 line item to subsidize the GATRA service to the senior center, and we are adding one additional stop to the new food pantry. We've been very lucky to use one-time revenues for these for the pandemic. Representative Roy has been fantastic and got us some ARPA money on this. We've also had the Friends of the Franklin Elders has also subsidized this. But at the end of the day, with visitation back, the town needs to subsidize some level of the GATRA rides to the senior center. And the food pantry expansion costs $1,000 based on our ridership data. Danielle and her staff have done a great job costing these out. And it's just about time right now we need to put that in the budget. There's also $160,000 in there for 2 additional positions in the finance office, which will benefit both the town and school finance offices and the human resource offices and the procurement offices. And we need to go through a little bit of a restructuring there, but they're severely understaffed, and those 2 positions are key for both the operations of all those offices here on the 2nd floor. I think you'll hear from the DPW director about our fleet management. Unfortunately, we just can't simply do it through, basically managing our fleet by committee, which has basically been happening from a team effort all around. We are proposing a fleet manager. We have almost 200 pieces of apparatus from both the town and the schools. And it's just at the time where the market is changing with electric vehicles and everything, green communities. We just need someone to do that position. And then also something the town has talked about for many years, a cultural arts director is in the town administrator's budget for a full-time position for a half a year. For those of you who are new, this is a frequent trick at local governments where you can't finance maybe the whole position in 1 year. So you do it for a half a year and then take on the full cost the next year, and you kind of spread that cost impact out over a couple of years. And there's also $10,000 in discretionary new spending for the Cultural Council. And I'm not sure about any of you about trying to hire part-time employment these days. It is virtually impossible. And we finally have refilled the Tarrant archivist position at some point. We hope it's this year, but certainly if not this year, next year, we have to make that a full-time position, or else really the staffing capacity of the Historical Museum will take a huge step back. And there's just a lot of work to do up there to get that place organized, in addition to the capital projects that are there. I just note the 2 paramedic positions ultimately are covered by ambulance receipts, technically not in the tax levy. So that's why I didn't offer it up here as part of discretionary spending, because there's a revenue source to pay for it. Really quickly, I put this up there. People will see a huge shift in the DPW budget this year. The main reason why, except for inflation, is really to do with stormwater. I know all of you on the finance committee are familiar with that. Everybody behind me in the audience is familiar with that. But just over $1 million in operating budget capacity is coming off the books and going to the stormwater utility, which we'll talk about later tonight. I just did an easy chart to break down for everybody where those revenues are going. So we're basically replacing it back into the DPW, reinvesting in roads and sidewalks, and also our snow and ice removal. I just got to at least throw a little bit of a bone. It may not sound like a big deal, but Natalie, you've always asked the question, why are we funding a basic emergency response this way? And we couldn't have agreed with you more. And now fully funding basically our snow and ice removal in our operating budget, which is where it should be, which will free up after we go through another year cycle, which will free up a lot in capital funding. And so, you know, I know it's taken you 3 years, I think, being on the FinCom, but we finally got there and found a way to do it. And I know many other members of the Finance Committee have been asking this for years. So again, all of this information, again, is in the budget narrative. I'm just doing a quick overview. These are just some sample summary points. The narrative has 4 or 5 pages of these, but just some summary points. Inflation is now settled in the operating budget. We've talked about this for over a year and a half. At department head meetings, at council meetings, at finance committee meetings, you can see the impacts of inflation now settle into the budget. I think what we all hope, to give a glimmer of hope towards FY25, is hopefully the major spikes in electricity and basic costs, hopefully we've seen that crest, I hope. We are still going to be dealing with inflation throughout the year, particularly in facilities and DPW, when there are bids going out for different contracts, for different things like chemicals or grounds or you name it. But we'll have to see how those go throughout the year. But if people are looking for a little bit of silver lining, hopefully those have crested. If those have crested and plateaued, then FY25, we should see a lot more tax levy capacity available for investment. Competing demands, fixed cost requests, new initiative expectations clearly far outweigh our ability to pay. And certainly there's a little room the Finance Committee and the Council have with discretionary spending. But even with that discretionary spending, it's still not even close to what people have manufactured in their heads in terms of what they want. And we know that from the Joint Budget Subcommittee meeting on March 8th, right? Where a budget model went out showing a structural deficit of 5 or 6 million. Obviously a lot of that was the school department, but even beyond that, we have a lot of other needs, which we'll get to in a minute. I just have to add it in there, as I was writing out these slides, we're kind of victims of our own success. I think for the tax rate that people pay, if we levitate out of the debate of certain issues, I think we can all agree, the view from 10,000 feet, the quality of life in this community is absolutely elite. And we are really riding on our reputation as a community for recruitment and retention and a lot of other great services. As I've said many times before, but again for the folks at home for their first time, debt and interest is still a concern for me. As the number declines, and we'll see that in the budget, it declined this year by about 340,000, that's just getting sucked up by other initiatives. And eventually when we want to go out to borrow money, no matter how good our bond rating is, the interest rate in this environment is still going to be high, and the town is still going to pay a higher portion of interest than they did 3, 4, 5 years ago, and that's still going to suck up more of the tax levy. So again, we have a lot of other projects on the front burner, and we should really do all that we can to avoid all attempts at reserves. We want to maintain the AAA bond rating for many reasons, and I know it feels rainy right now and wet, but as many of you know, it is not rained and it is not downpoured yet. There are certainly rainier days to come. One last slide. One thing I have to put up here for a lot of folks, the public does need to be conscientious of the impacts of these cost increases. To all of you on the FinCom, the folks who live in the community behind me, and everybody watching at home, as property values increase, means your tax bill goes up. So last year, the average bill was about $350. We have a stormwater fee coming on board on July 1st. Everybody's aware of that. And the council has to, and they just did the first approval, the second one will be in May, at the budget hearings, but a 20% sewer rate increase July 1st, an automatic 15% increase in 24, a 10% increase in 25. That is for the Beaver Street Interceptor. I can assure you those rates would be double or triple if we don't do this project. All of you know that, but for the folks at home, just that they're aware. The municipal aggregation 10-cent electricity rate ends this coming November 2023. I know all of you are aware of it, but last winter was a 33-cent rate hit for towns that were not in aggregation. Our deal ends this November. I am doing the best I can to go back out to bid. I can assure you the rate will not be 10 cents. Okay, that might be an obvious thing to say, but for people at home that are dealing with inflation already and on fixed incomes, you know, come next winter, we don't know what those electricity rates are going to be. The council just heard their first interaction with PFAS. That will be a water rate hike next year to pay for PFAS remediation in wells due to some new regulations from the EPA. And we will hear on Wednesday, the superintendent of Tri-County will be here to go through the plans on the school vote. But as I think all of you know, there's a likely debt exclusion for a new high school up there. What these rate increases here do not include is anything to do with the police station, the Remington Jefferson remodel, which we've had planned for years, the recycling center, school and town technology needs, which I know we'll hear from Tim on Wednesday, public infrastructure needs, the Washington Street sidewalk, which we already have authorization to borrow for that, but we obviously don't want to go and borrow right now. And I know I speak for the residents on Barron Road, Kenwood Circle, and the commercial industrial sector, and many other residential roads, which have multi-million-dollar road projects, okay? And then still, just to really depress you more, that does not include the structural deficit we've heard in the operating budget from the school district. It does not include any new sidewalk projects, any net zero initiatives, community development initiatives, athletic fields or facilities, mental health initiatives, or reoccurring capital. And obviously, as all of you are looking at me, which you're not looking at me, and I don't blame you, I wouldn't look at me either, and I'm thankful for Chris for not showing my face on the screen, because I'm sure people will be throwing tomatoes at home. Obviously, national and global economics, we keep hearing about interest rates going up. You know, your prediction's as good as mine. There's a lot on here, and I'm obviously saying all of this for a reason, because the wish lists that people have are just so far out of sight from money that we have. And as we go through tonight, and hopefully people will hang in there with us, and we'll go line item by line item tonight in our usual deep dive scenarios, you'll realize that there's not a lot of more blood to squeeze out of the planning department or the conservation department or the health department or all the other departments. That a lot of these minor investments we're making, or that's in the proposed budget, are modest investments of things that have been lingering around and needs the town has needed for a long time. There's obviously a lot of competing demand. So before we get into the budget, I'll end one more time on the town website where the town budget is. Mr. Chairman, folks can click on that link and go check out the budget and take a deeper dive read than even this 30 minutes was right now. Thank you.
So everybody isn't committing suicide. Just think, though, if you took your house that you have today in Franklin, put it on a trailer and hauled it to almost any surrounding community, your tax rate, your tax bill would significantly rise. I mean, significantly rise. I live on Sherman Avenue. If I haul my house down to Village Street in Medway, my $6,300 tax bill, or whatever it is, would be double that, easily. So, that's the good side of the whole thing.
Great. People get a good bang for their buck.
Yep. Oh, no question. What do you want to do, Jamie? Go town,
Yeah, just start right off at Department 111, the Town Council.
town council.
Through Mr. Chairman, so the
They
department
doubled.
request this year is to double that number for two reasons. One, the dues now to be a member of the Mass Municipal Association exceed the $4,000 allotment. And also, it's just about time to get the number up a little bit. It's been a good thing that many recently elected or newer counselors have been trying to go to the MMA conference each year. You know, that's $300. And there's some other professional development trainings. So this is a nominal amount of money to double up to make sure that after the election in November that any new counselors that want some training sessions or go to the MMA conference can go. I know Councilor Hamlin, Councilor Frangillo, and several others have gone in the past, and I think everybody knows that that's really good. In my opinion, it's very good for the community. I hope eventually all go. Because it's a great opportunity to learn about a lot of these dynamics and be able to do that.
Town administrator's budget?
Does anybody have any questions on the council? Just, I don't know. Okay, so the town administrator's budget. So, go down. Through Mr. Chairman, so the main increases here in the personnel services have to do with the salary for a deputy town administrator. And also in here are the traditional, obviously, 2.5% COLAs. Excuse me. And then also in here is $45,000 for the full-time Director of Public Arts and Cultural Initiatives position, but that's for a half a year. So eventually the salary in our salary study showed a certain grade, so I sliced that salary in half. But that makes up the personnel line item. The main driver of the cost increases for the expenses have to do, again, with memberships to the professional organizations for ICMA, Mass Municipal Managers Association, the Mass Municipal Association, and of course, because now there's not just, that's also for the deputy town administrator as well. So those numbers have gone up a little bit, not just to reflect one person going there, but also two. I will also note, if I go to the next page, there is a increase of a proposed new item in there for a sign lease. I don't want to discuss the details in depth right now because there's a negotiation going on a marketing initiative, but I hope to have final clarity of that before the final budget is done later this fall. And so I'm putting that in there as a placeholder for a marketing initiative that I hope comes to fruition. So those are really the cost drivers in both the expense budget and, as you can see on the salary chart, the deputy, as well as the half-year public arts director.
What would we be advertising? What's the thrust of that?
We're advertising Franklin.
I understand that, and it'll be easy to write, but are we pushing industrial growth, restaurants? What's the theme, do you think?
If I
Or
gave
is
you
that
the theme, I
TBD?
might give it away, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I'm still in negotiations, so just give me a little bit of time on that, and I'll be able to get back to you with some certainty.
Thursday?
Because
Oh.
I hope so. You never know.
Hey,
You never know.
this is the.
People will be happy, I will say that, and I'm saying that right on record. People will be pretty thrilled, so.
The next line is Finance Committee, obviously an
I have a
expensive
question, sorry, I have one
Whoops,
more
I'm
question.
sorry.
The deputy town administrator, are you, because this is budgeted for the full year, are you
That's correct.
far along on that? Because that's what, like,
I hope after the budget is over, there'll be an announcement with the appointed candidate.
perfect, okay.
Yep.
That's it.
Okay. FinCom, $1,500. I don't think we've spent it on anything that I remember since I've been here.
It's mainly just when folks go to the finance committee, they have like a day. I think at the MMA, I think the fee is like $50. I think some people have gone to that in the past.
They're all geared to finance committees with town meetings. It's really not what this is.
Just remember, we're the only city form of government with a finance committee. We're a hybrid form, right? So.
Yeah.
I think some of the information there is really not about that. It's much more about some of the mechanics of budgeting. You're right, it does include town meeting, but I think the folks that have gone in the past have enjoyed it. And hopefully we'll have some takers in the future. But,
Controller.
yep. Yeah, like I already explained on the slide earlier, really the cost increase there is really to deal with staff salaries at the COLA and the 2 additional positions that are vacant that will have to get 2 additional staff in there to help payroll, vendor payments, munis training, and a whole variety of stuff for a bit of a restructure down in the finance and HR departments. And then the auditor, I think the accounting and auditing service fee went up $5,000, $4,500. Some basic cost increases, nothing really huge.
I had a question. I listened to the auditor the other night. Do they do the finance side of the school department too, or is it, because I never heard the word school mentioned?
They just do the townwide numbers.
That surprises me a little bit.
I think ultimately that would likely be under the decision-making authority of the school committee, is my guess.
I agree.
If they did an outside audit of some sort.
Okay.
And this one also has, so this has it budgeted again for the full year. So is the assumption that these will get filled, obviously, very soon? Yeah.
Yeah.
I just know every
All
month.
those offices, I mean, I can speak for the schools on this too. There's just not enough staff to process all the work. It's just really, really intense. And I think, last year, just for an illustrated, we talked about electronic personnel records. I mean, those projects just really have not much of a chance to get off the ground without more folks just doing the day-to-day number crunching and reconciliations and payroll, deductions, contract compliance, quality control. I mean, I could go down the list, right? I mean, at some point, we have to be able to see the view from 30,000 feet and just realize at some point there just needs to be more bodies to do all that work. It's getting more complicated. And I think one of the other things that's in here too, Natalie, is, there's like 3 or 4 of us writing all these budget things, right? It's Chris, Kerry, Karen, myself. And we need a budget and fiscal analyst someday. A lot of mature communities have that position so that the capital people, I know as we get to be a more intellectual community, there'll be more intellectual questions. There'll be more narratives, metrics, numbers, analytics, cost outs that'll be required, especially as competition for dollars gets higher. I mean, we're just, as a community, just going to need more people to be able to do all those number crunchings. I mean, it's really the 4 department heads writing all this, and obviously we have other things to do too. And so I think the challenges in the future, if you look at the Natics and the Needhams and the Norwoods, they have a dedicated person that just does the production of the capital budget, the production of the operating budget, all the other federal stimulus type stuff, one-time revenues. And I think our goal would be is to really have, be able to see that from not just like town or school, but really a joint effort to be able to have greater support from those positions across the board, both town and school.
Yeah, and I certainly am not questioning the need for people, because I see it on our end of just how much people that work here do. I'm more thinking, if that extends a month, I mean, that's a savings of salary, taxes, benefits.
Yeah.
So like anything so that's really where my question was going.
And that's a great question, because where does all that unspent money go every year?
Cash.
Free cash.
Free cash.
So the capital program that we do every year is based off unspent money from the town, essentially the town departments, by the way. As we heard from the auditors last week, the free cash balances in a lot of those accounts, I think he even mentioned it after Councilor Pellegrini's question, I think our departments are doing an excellent job with that. So even a month, you're correct, could yield some savings that goes into the free cash pool, but I'm sure, and to be honest, I'm sure that those hires, posting a job, interviews, it probably will bleed into the deeper into the summer.
Okay, thanks.
Let's see. Assessors, Board of. Not much change.
Not much. Kevin and the staff do a great job. I mean, it's just the basic cost increases. Any questions or?
No.
Okay. Treasurer collector?
Let's see. They're almost just inflation increases from my looking at it.
I mean, I highlighted a lot of them already in the slideshow, and if there's anything that sticks out to the committee that's not basic cost increases from contracts, general services, postage, audit, all that stuff, obviously most of those costs are going up a little bit. And same thing with the staff personnel. If there's any major changes, we'll certainly, talk about them, but.
Yeah, expenses.
Does anybody have any questions on the treasurer collector's office?
Expenses from 23 and projected 24 are exactly the same. You can't do better than that.
You can't.
So,
Where does the cost so I'm assuming we have to pay, is it Unipay that does all the
Yeah.
collection things? Where does the cost of that service go?
I just want to take a break, so could maybe Carrie, could you come up?
She's on the way.
Like, so you know, people don't have to look at me the whole night.
Wow, that,
Get tall,
hi.
too.
Hi. Carrie Bertoni, treasurer collector. So that would be under other contractual services. But Unipay, there is no fee.
Got it, okay.
Well, we do pay a fee because we absorb the costs, so people would pay online, the ACH fee.
Yeah.
So that's under other contractual services.
Explain that one more time. What do we
Okay.
do?
So we, the fee that, to pay online, pay your bills online, we absorb, the town absorbs that fee that we, Unipay was charging to use your bank account information. The town now absorbs that for school and town payments.
Got it,
So
okay.
And that's under my budget.
Right.
Got
So
it,
the
okay.
bus fee is the most recent one, I think,
Yes.
right? Transportation? fee?
Transportation.
Is it transportation?
Yeah, okay. That's good, all right, thank you.
You're
Do we
welcome.
keep enough balances there to offset the costs?
We are, yes, we are. We're also encouraging paperless billing to help offset the costs for the
Because
bill
they should,
printing.
now that rates are up, they should be paying us a little bit anyway. Speaking as an old banker, very old banker.
Does anybody have any questions other than Natalie? Anybody in Zoom land?
I don't see any hands up.
Oh, okay. So I think we're
Legal
checking in.
services, I assume this is Mark?
Mark, and then the traditional expenses for special counsel, for labor, solar, or anything else we need, just an expense budget. Yep.
Are we into, it went up, well, it didn't go up anything from 23, never mind.
I mean, I'll just say really quickly, relatively speaking, we pay a fraction of what other districts or towns pay for legal services. Fraction.
I don't-
Fraction.
I don't know of any around here that have a staff attorney, which makes a difference.
The city form of government essentially gives you a license to do that, but we don't do billable hours, and just one other cost saving, Karen, the HR director and I and the department heads do collective bargaining. So we don't have an attorney with us, we don't have labor counsel, we write our own contracts. I mean, for some communities, they could spend $250,000 on collective bargaining, or more. If they're in arbitration, you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on this stuff. I say this only because the public, I think, should understand that, the staff here are doing a lot more than sometimes other communities are, where they just hire a lawyer to come in and do everything for them. Will we do that work ourselves? I think it also helps us with good labor peace. And our unions are easy and good to work with, so it generally makes it for a more cost-effective. I've often argued a lot of times, why spend $250,000 on a lawyer to help you negotiate when you can just work together, and if you're just reasonable, you could spend that money, instead of a lawyer, you could actually put it into the COLA, right? Instead of 2% in a lawyer, why not do 2.5%, just for a quick example, so.
That assumes.
So far, so good.
That assumes amicable people on both sides. And that,
Assumes amicable people on both sides.
and
But
that works down from the department head sitting here.
absolutely,
So,
absolutely.
Human resources.
So really here, you have basic costs, the biggest, the real increase here, we are finally budgeting the $3,000 for a hopeful joint LinkedIn account for recruitment and retention purposes. It just seems to be the wave of where everybody's going to get a leg up on recruitment and retention. We have a great LinkedIn page, but to buy the premium account, we're trying to get that. So it's a nominal cost, obviously, but that's the big thing.
Have we drawn the line where we're not storing paper in file cabinets everywhere?
We haven't even started. I mean, we have quotes, we've got some of that forward, but it's just, yeah, Karen.
Getting the past, going forward will be easy. Getting the past stuff in is gonna be
I think
if we
finding
do.
the time and the space to do it is what the challenge is.
Okay, benefits coordinator. Information technology is not tonight, right? It's part of the schools?
So Tim had a conflict and wasn't able to come tonight. This is the town portion.
Okay.
I can certainly do the best I can to answer any questions, but the administrative personnel is the 50-50 position we have for a cybersecurity specialist with the school department, which is a basic increase or small decrease, I guess. But and then everything else in here with hardware maintenance services and licensing. This is Viewpoint. This is online permitting. I mean, on down the list. This is just town software. The rest of the IT department is in the school budget, and you can talk about that obviously on Wednesday in terms of their cost drivers. But I don't think anybody's shy about the fact that sometimes I look at this and think it only went up 70,000. Maybe there's a good it didn't go up as bad as probably what it could be, but. Obviously, all that's Munis. It's all the licensing services for the basic operational software that the town has.
Is there any new ones in there? Because it's kind of a big increase for baseline. It goes up like 20%. And I know like standards are like usually 5 to 10%.
I'll ask Tim. I can't remember off the top of my head
Okay,
if there
just
was
curious.
something new. I feel like there might be, but I know the electronic personnel records is still in here from last year. So that might be part of the cost increase, but we can ask him.
Like
on
a full
Wednesday.
year versus a partial 2 might be in there or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Town clerk.
Want to break it up? You want to go?
Absolutely.
Go for it.
No. I'm gonna stand over here.
Have almost no new money, but
No, I think the increase is $1,000, and what I'd like, thank you, Steve. I want to start attending conferences again. For many years,
Yeah.
we haven't gone to conferences, so I'd like to do that.
Find out if anybody's doing it better.
There
Basic-
isn't.
nope.
Right in.
No.
Is this, elections is not in here? That's
Next line, it's the next department.
So I'll
Technically, it's a
stay right
separate
here.
department. Yeah.
Okay. And nothing really changed.
Not in town clerk.
Moving on. Elections. Do we have any state elections this year? We do not, right?
We do not have a state election this year. We do have a town election, and then we have the tri-county election. So what I did, and you'll see the increase in that, I budgeted an additional $9,000 for the tri-county election. And I know that's a fee that's going to be reimbursed to us. And I'm not sure if I'm going to be sending them the bills as I get them, but I am more comfortable in paying them and then getting reimbursed. I have a great reputation with all of our vendors, and I don't want to mess that up. So I'll pay the bills, and then they can reimburse us. And if I need to go into the town election, I'll be reimbursed.
How much does a full, like a presidential election add to it? Because that's one more year.
So, that year is going to be huge money. We have 3 elections that year, so it's going to be possibly 4. So that year is going to be quite busy. I don't even want to go there.
Oh, okay.
But it's elections.
Yeah,
You got to do it.
Yeah.
Again, this is just for the new people at home watching. These are the things that are fixed costs. They're just cost drivers.
They're not wants.
We get a little bit of, they're
They're
not
needs.
discretionary items. And what do we get for reimbursement from the state?
So I got 55,000. Did I get last
For
year?
the last one?
The last one.
Yeah.
I got
Some of
quite
the-
a bit.
Some of the costs are offset,
So basically, the
right?
payroll for
Yeah.
the election workers, they reimburse us. Postage, they'll reimburse us.
Yeah.
So I did get quite a chunk last year.
Yeah.
Pet peeve, the parties ought to pay for the primaries. It has nothing to do with anything the town does, but we have to run an election. Just a pet
Absolutely.
peeve.
And then just a small increase in supplies, bins. You can never have enough bins.
No.
seriously. And supplies, every time you think you have enough supplies, the state will throw in a curveball and you don't have enough supplies, so. But I do try my best to find, a more reasonable source. If WB Mason is more expensive, I'll go somewhere else.
And through you, Mr. Chairman, to Nancy's point, she raises something good for the new folks that are watching. People may go through the budget and see other contractual services, advertising, printing services, postage, office supplies, office equipment. These are generally, as all of you know, pretty standard in most budgets. And people may say, well, maybe there's 1,000 there or 500 there you can get. But she just nailed it why we don't tinker with those very much. Because one of them may go up and maybe over budget, and we use the other ones at the bottom line of the department to cover the cost of other increases. So those numbers shift a lot, particularly things like printing services. They may need to do a flyer or something else that may end up something we have to do from the state. We have to do it. We may not have the money in the budget, but one of the other areas will fill that in. So departments are responsible for managing those monies throughout the year. But having those little extra couple $1,000 contingencies for office equipment, yeah, we may not know exactly what machine we need to buy today, but ultimately, in the middle of the year, you don't want to be surprised and not have the money to be able to do it. So I'm just using that as an example. Some people go through and say, well, maybe we could chop off 1,000 here or 500 there. That really doesn't work. You're just harming the department from being able to do things mid-year, and Nancy's department's a great example of where that happens.
Now, any department has the ability to move stuff within the expense?
That's correct. At the end of the day, it's about the bottom line expense total.
Okay, so they don't
So-
have to come to the council or whatever.
The only time you have to go to the council is if you have to shift from one department to the end, and as all of you know, we do that every June.
Okay.
So the finance team builds up the end of the year, see where everybody's at. If we need to make any transfers, we do them. And fortunately, in a while, we haven't had to do a lot because people are managing their budgets well. But obviously, with inflation and cost increases, we may have a couple more of those this year than we usually do.
I'm set. Anybody?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Zoning Board of Appeals.
Yep. For advertising,
They
they
don't-
get a lot of applications, so pretty straightforward. Gus will be here on public safety on, saw him earlier, maybe he's still here. But
What are we next? Planning. Again, it's not up
basic
very much.
increases, I mean, it's
Expenses
really your staff COLA. That's basically the driver there.
Any
Questions?
questions, guys?
No?
I haven't seen a hand up on Zoom, so
I've been
I
looking.
guess it's on
Yep.
up there.
I think Stephanie and Chun have followed along pretty well. AgCom, it's $1,000. General expenses. They're breaking the budget yet again.
Hey, I'll ask the question, because I usually pay attention. Who is on the AgCom?
I think
Is-
Roger
do we
Trahan,
have-
I think Roger's the chair. Roger Tran. It's a
Unknown
full,
name.
full.
He's Vic
And-
Hoffman, Linda Noel, Marion Samansky.
And for information, what do they do?
Well, we got a website right here. I might as well, there's a whole story map, George, so I'll send
Yeah.
you the link.
I have it.
Right, you can take a trip down the story map, right?
Yeah, and also it's to promote the local agriculture that's in the town, to help preserve it, to work, to bring people together. If there's any issue, they help. There's been a few issues I know that Roger and I have helped with. And also Roger, the AgCom, are working with Bree Delay, Goodlander, the conservation agent, and the Conservation Commission. So everybody's working together to kind of promote outdoor use and local farms.
Okay, answered my question. Not a bad deal for $1,000, I guess, right?
Nope. Great deal.
We have a great
Right there.
we have a great Facebook page too.
Oh,
Deal. They do.
it will be looked at tonight. Okay. Public property.
So this is obviously one of the
D'Angelo.
larger accounts. I think I've already summarized most of it. Mike, I know is here somewhere. Oh, there he is. If anybody has any questions about electricity, propane, gas, stormwater, utilities, custodians, school maintenance, you can kind of see it all broken out. These are all broken out into pretty detailed categories. We used to put in building by building projections of every single account. That was like another 10 pages. And then people said it was too long. So we chopped that out. But I mean, I think you can see with the electricity costs up top, you have $500,000 right there. I will say we did sign a new agreement for electricity below 14 cents a kilowatt for 4 years. So that rate should be stable for 4 years, which is pretty good.
We just put all the houses in town on it after November?
I would love that. I highly doubt I'll get that, but it's one of those things. I think we talked about FinCom meetings before. I mean, Mike and I, for like a month, see each other every day, multiple times. We go out to bid. We have a consultant that helps us navigate all this. It's strategy. It's hitting the markets at the right time. It's global economics. This is one thing that does get impacted probably most than others. National and global economics. But also, just keep in mind one other thing. Having a 4-year contract also provides fuel security, right? So ultimately, we have that deal for 4 years as the town, almost no matter what happens to anything else, which, getting a 13.9 cent rate per kilowatt's pretty good, given what's going on in the world. I'm still shocked that it came in that well, but I'll take it for 4 years.
Shall you be shocked again in November?
I've had enough shocks, so I can. So I don't know if anybody has any questions about parts, plumbing supplies. This is for all town buildings, all town schools. So 1 million square feet of school space, 1,000,001, 300 square feet of, 1.4 million square feet of space. It is what it is.
So
Happy to turn the lights off and go home earlier if everybody wants. I mean, everything's auto shut off. Every light is LED. I mean, we've done everything just about you can do to save money.
So, the 3 deputy directors, I assume they're, I'll use basic, carpentry, plumbing, and electricity. I know that's not the breakout. They each have responsibilities of some part of Mike's old job?
So from an org chart perspective, I think there's one in the budget document. There are, the compensation and classification plan essentially recommended a slightly different staff structure. All of these positions were in the current year budget, so they're not new. But the titles have been reorganized. So just for illustration, Rich Gaskin's been with us for probably 2 decades or 15, 20 years. Many people know Rich, who coordinates all the custodial services for the schools in town. So he's now a deputy director of custodial services. Marco Brancato left. He was our deputy director for maintenance. They oversee all of the 3 maintenance, carpentry, plumbing, and staff electrician, in addition to all the vendors. So you can imagine how many vendors come in and out all the time in the school buildings and town buildings to fix things. So, and then we finally have Mike, after probably lobbying for 20 years, 15 years, 10 years, 5 years, Mike, whatever it is. He actually has, what I have coming, which is a real real deputy for engineering. And the big issue there, as all of you know, you could go back in the capital appropriations we did 2 years ago. Some of them haven't even started yet. Senior Center Pavilion, the cupola at the museum. I mean, you just look at the volume of what Mike has to do. And it's just not doable by one person anymore. So, those are the 3 deputies. if you will. And all of them had title changes from the compensation plan recommended, so that there was a real hierarchy and a structure, and it was clearer to the staff and everybody about who reports to who.
And this covers all buildings, schools,
Yep.
through, there's no split of any kind, right?
And obviously, really, it's all school and town facilities. Talk about the ball fields as well. We know DPW does grounds, but, there's different, in the collective bargaining agreements, obviously, some people do sidewalks, some do shoveling, but obviously between Mike and Brutus, and both of their budgets, DPW, encompass all of the costs for the schools in terms of maintenance.
How much do we have, so with like keeping the lights on at Davis Thayer be in there? Like, until that building's repurposed, how much is Davis Thayer costing to just keep the lights on there? I'm assuming some sort of heat in the winter.
Yep.
Yeah,
That's
it's
a great
about
question.
$100,000, so.
Is that all
includes-
in, Mike?
So heat, electricity, inspections, fire extinguishers, testing of the automatic sprinkler system. Pretty much everything we do in every other building for safety and security, which isn't a real huge, you can't turn off the heat.
Right, yeah, yeah.
Bad
yep.
things happen to buildings.
Yep.
We want it to look just like it does till we figure out
What to do with it.
what to do with it.
Okay, well, that makes sense.
And, I never asked this question, but are we gonna save any money from the composting initiatives? Do folks know about the composting at the schools?
So composting, so working with Derek, with the DPW, Colin from the school, myself, Richard. We've been, so we started a composting program that collects all food waste in the schools right from the kids. So the kids bring up their trays, we have a composting contractor that picks up bins full of compost. They're out of Portland, Maine, it gets trucked up to around Bangor, Maine, and put into a digester. So these things kind of level off. We first implemented Keller Sullivan, both of those schools. We then implemented Remington and Jefferson back in February. We just met with Horace Mann and Oak Street Friday, and over the next few weeks we'll get them on, and the two smaller elementaries, Parmenter and Kennedy. So it's really about, food is by far the heaviest thing that goes in trash. Food, plural, and milk, and beverages. And so beverages all get poured into a separate container. That goes down the drain. The compost goes out weekly, and the only thing we'll have left to implement in the fall is the high school. But we're already started in the kitchens at the other schools, so the high school kitchen has been, as they're cutting vegetables and making lunch, that all gets composted as well. And right now it's about neutral cost-wise,
Yeah.
but we're doing the right thing. It's coming down the pike. If we didn't do it this year, we'd be doing it in
Right.
a year or two. So it's better to be ahead of the curve, work out the details, and it's something we probably should have been doing, but we tried it 6 years ago, but it just wasn't anyone to take it. And now there's a lot of companies out there that are taking it, using it, at a reasonable price too.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Anybody else, guys? No? Central services? Which
Postage.
is what?
Postage. Required mailings. It's mostly required mailings for tax bills,
Oh, I'm thinking Central Motors, but it's not.
He goes last tonight.
Oh, okay.
Bruce is last.
Save the best for last.
Oh,
So this is just Central Services.
Oh. he didn't even hear it. Good thing he didn't hear that.
All right.
All right.
All right, where do we jump to? Next one in line is police.
Let me just, they're,
Jump to 510.
Let me just get it up on the screen here so people can follow around at home.
Long way down.
Page 103.
Where's my page numbers? Oh, yeah.
There we go. Board of Health?
Getting
For
there.
those that may have seen the council a few weeks ago, we're offsetting a lot of the costs through a regional shared program with the Metacomet Public Health Alliance, but essentially here you have basic cost increases of 30 grand in salaries, and most of the strategic initiatives that Kathy and her staff are dealing with in the Board of Health really go through the Public Alliance now, really the shared services, which is about 300,000 shared by 3 communities a year. And we're hoping it'll continue, but it's contingent upon state funding, but it looks good for the future, at least for a few more years, and we'll see what comes out. But
Who are the 3 communities? Franklin,
Rentham and Norfolk. Yep.
Metacomet, basic. Nothing really changed there either.
Senior Center, kind of articulated a little while ago. And I think part of the point I'd like to just add on to the Senior Center, if you look at their FY23 budget, and I think every year, Mr. Chairman, you were here on the committee, maybe, Dave and a couple others that have been on for several, 4 or 5 years. I mean, their expense line item was $6,000. Look at the expense line item in 2001. It was $1,500. Now, they have very generous donations to the Friends of the Franklin Elders. They get a lot of state grant money. Can't take that away. But, the big increase here is really due to GATRA, which is something that's critical. Essentially, we give our senior citizens a discount to subsidize the rate to get to the senior center, in short. Now, under an old system, they used to be free, but there's an inequity with that from a deal that was made years and years and years ago. And there is a lot of justification and nervousness about if you don't subsidize the rate, or at least phase it in over a long period of time to get to a full rate, the population that goes will decrease. And so then more and more people get isolated, and as we learned during the pandemic, we have a pretty good idea of the isolation issues in town, where those folks are. Danielle and the staff down there do a lot of outreach to them. Our paramedics, during the pandemic, went to homes and gave shots, and so it's a very collaborative environment. The additional personnel staff, as I articulated a little bit ago, it was about $80,000 for the full-time administrative assistant and the part-time van driver. Why is it part-time? Because we've got to order the van, and that's going to take a long time. To Natalie's point earlier, I don't know when that will come, or when this, we're still waiting for the traffic light at Washington and Grove, which was 15 months. So who knows? So I tried to offset the cost a little for the full van driver, but as Christina, the deputy director, who has since unfortunately left and gone back to Foxborough to do a position there, articulated, she coordinated transportation in Foxborough for 4 years. That's why we kind of brought her here. And she said, what good is a van driver if there's somebody there's not helping them coordinate the trips? And I was like, oh, well, that makes a lot of sense, duh. So really it's a modest investment, and as Danielle and her staff have done a great job after the staffing transitions down there, and I think, Councilor Mercer was the chair of the building committee. If anybody's been down there recently, we're really maximizing the space of the building. And so with that comes staff, and I think that my guess is that this is the year where we'll finally have a full staffing complement to go with the building that was built to do a lot more, where just even 2 or 3 years ago, we were subsidizing part-time hourly employees bit by bit through federal state grants and this donation, And it's like, wait a minute, if you're gonna have this beautiful building that everybody says is state of the art and great, then why aren't we filling it up with people and personnel to be able to do stuff? This is one of those classic examples of something that I think sometimes as we run forward into the future, we're still not catching up with the past. Where the van went away 6-7 years ago, folks have been lobbying for it for years. I don't blame them. I heard about it when I was living at the senior center for 4 months during the transition. And it's just time to get the van back, and we got to kind of catch up to the stuff that's been laying around that we haven't fully done yet. Here's just a good example of that. So the van will be used for certainly field trips, but it will also be used for medical appointments, for some people that cannot make it to certain medical appointments. And how that all gets divvied up, we'll obviously leave to Danielle and her staff. And obviously Danielle's here and Sarah here if you have any questions for them about these things.
I know, go.
Does the subsidizing of GATRA go away if we get a van?
No. These are just for daily trips. This is just to get there for like breakfast, lunch,
The
you know,
van
for
would be-
activities. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. This is like actually kind of, it's separate. The van is a larger van that will be, you know, go to the De Cordova Museum or go to the park or go to, you know, stuff. I don't know, Danielle, if you want to maybe
Does
add a
it
little
pick
bit to
people
it.
up? This is timely, so I was volunteering this morning at the Hopkinton Senior Center, and I washed all 3 of their vans.
Oh my gosh,
Yes, so I'm just curious, yeah, like, so they would go to.
they have
and
3.
They have 2 buses and a van, not a bus,
Yeah.
but like and so something you take to like a wedding, right? Something
Yeah,
like that, but,
yeah.
and so they were saying they actually have daily people that they pick up daily and bring them for lunch at
Yep.
the senior center and things like that, so more just curious,
Yeah.
what's the use of the GATRA versus the van, if we got the van?
Sure, so we're still trying to figure that out. Danielle Hopkins, the director of the senior center. GATRA would be the main ridership to bring people to and from the senior center. Our van, GATRA is wonderful, but it has some limitations because we are on the edge. Bellingham has a movie theater, it has Market Basket, it has Walmart, a lot of subsidized opportunities for seniors to go shopping. GATRA won't bring them to Bellingham. Milford Hospital, Attleboro Hospital, there's only certain limited days that they're going to those. So if you have doctor's appointments there, you have to find a friend or phone someone that can help you get there. So we also have a supportive day program that people from different towns come to that. Mostly it's Franklin residents, but we do have Walpole or Sharon, and we can help people with dementia and their caregivers provide ridership to the senior center that way as well.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else? Have we ordered the van?
Great question. Did we order it, Mike? I don't think so. Yeah.
No, okay. But it's gone through the capital.
Just went through the
program.
cap, yeah.
Yeah, okay, I just didn't remember it.
Yep.
Okay, anything else on the senior center? I'll be there shortly.
When the van shows up, we'll pick you up.
Used to walk by it all the time.
I know.
Not doing much of that
We will pick you up, George.
now. Veteran services.
Yep. I know that Shannon is out of town. She's on Zoom tonight. But as you can see, pretty much level service, just the basic municipal COLA, 2.5%.
And is this the one that was financed by Norfolk County or something for a while? The veteran there was some financing issue a couple of
That-
years ago.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that's gone.
That's gone.
So,
okay.
yeah, the previous Veteran Services Officer was funded through a regional agreement, actually, with the town of Avon, of all communities, through the county. So now the town is lucky enough to have Shannon and Deborah. We have a full-time staff member and a part-time with Deborah, and they're compensated at the level that they should be in the compensation classification plan. So now they're town of Franklin employees. What you're referencing, just in case folks at home are wondering, is you're referencing an agreement that when we hired Shannon, we transitioned out of that. So now we have our own staff as opposed to paying the county for a regional agreement, which was just like a basic payment out the door, an assessment. So now we have our own full-time staff.
And control as it comes.
That's right. That's right. Any
Is
questions?
$165,000 enough for support, ordinary benefits? I'm just asking.
Shannon, do you wanna tune in real quick?
Sure, absolutely. That is a good ballpark number right now. As you can see, in fiscal year 2022, we expended $116,984. I like to have a little bit extra in the budget in case we have an influx of Chapter 115 clients. The numbers have been going down for a variety of reasons, but at the same time, with the overall economic forecast, we want to make sure there's plenty in that budget, and I think 165,000 is a reasonable estimate.
Unfortunately, it probably, as World War II vets drop off, and Korean vets, and now Vietnam vets. All right, I digressed. Thank you.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thank you.
Library.
I think they speak for themselves. I mean, you can talk, Felicia, I'm sure will be more than happy to come up and talk about programs, but they, just for the long-serving FinCom members and the new ones, this commitment to MAR is still there. I can't even remember what MAR stands for. I know it's minimum something requirement, some ridiculous acronym, but as we've stated for several years now, the town has hit that number. And obviously, if people have questions for Felicia.
That was my question. Did we meet the,
Oh, it was? Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
I know it's busy. I go by all the time.
It's yes. Felicia, do you want to do a quick promo? I mean, sure. Of course.
Oh,
Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, Mr. Chairman, through you. Yes, the MAR stands for the Municipal Appropriation Requirement.
Appropriation.
Yes, so that's the figure that a town must fund its library, the minimum figure. So I want to thank you guys for the support. I want to thank Jamie. Having it is really a good thing for us in that it allows us to plan. So the goal is to maintain the high level of service that the community has come to expect from us. With this budget, we'll be able to keep our staffing levels and hours open. We don't anticipate any changes in any of those two. We should be able to keep our collections not only relevant but current. And the online collections, the e-books, the cost keeps rising because the publishers are free to charge us as they, anything they decide is fair for them is what they charge us. Any restrictions they want to put on some of the collections, they do. For example, we can pay $89 or $100 and something for a title that in print costs $12. And even at that, they restrict us only to 20 uses. So after 20 people download the title, you say, hey, your money is up, you need to pay some more. So that market still is really unstable because of what the publishers are doing. And this budget allows us at least to anticipate some of the changes and provide the collections as people request. The beautiful thing about our system is that we can see how many people are waiting for a book at any one time. So we are able to provide them copies ahead before the publication, or sometimes when they fall in line, when they're requesting the books, we can see and then we can buy it that way, which is a more efficient use of our limited dollars. Now, to our programs, I have to tell you, it's just incredible programming that's going on over there, and the staff is just amazing at delivering these programs. We offer an average of 121 or more programs a month. 52 of those are geared towards kids 0 to 5, because that's where our customers are truly. It's a joy to serve the little ones. And 37 of those programs every month are geared towards middle school and high school kids, and 32 and more sometimes towards adults. And how have we been able to do it with a staff of just 12 people, 11 full-time and 1 part-time? It's because we are also tapping into our seniors. We have 18 tax workhouse seniors who turn up. Dedicated ladies, dedicated gentlemen turn out every week to give us a hand. We have amazing residents who step up. Thank you. Like that. Yes, who step up also to offer programs. Yes, to offer programming. And we're also partnering with municipal departments. We're partnering with multicultural groups in the community. We're partnering with Dean College, and we're partnering with the Cultural District and Cultural Council to help us expand our cultural, our education and entertainment programs. So in all, what this budget does is afford us the stability to continue to grow, to continue to learn, to continue to evolve to meet the changing needs of the community. Thank you. I'll take any questions.
I'm just curious, how many people go through the, I'll call them turnstiles, come through the doors on an average day?
Actually, the doors, thanks to Mike, are now small. But, yes, for the bigger programs, we're turning to do them now outside. And I have to tell you that Dean College is stepped up to offer us the use of their facilities. We haven't started yet, but even at that, over 1,000 people still go through the building every day because we have sometimes 4 programs going on through each day, 4 different programs, and sometimes even 3 going on at the same time. 1 outside, every space in the building that we can use, we do. But the problem with that now is that the programming is only one of the reasons people come in the building. Many people also come to study, to work, and sometimes the noise is a little much for people who just want to study and do their homework and try to get some quiet time. So what we're doing is, as I speak to you, we're trying to reorganize the way we use our spaces to provide more quiet study areas on the 4th floor. So now we're shifting those collections that are on the 4th floor downstairs to make room for more seating areas. And at first when I thought about it, I thought it was going to be a quick project. It hasn't been. Luckily, we have a Tri-County student who is working as an intern, and he comes twice a week. He's been able to do most of the work. Mike has been in to take a look so that once we're done, he'll be shifting all the shelves and providing me with some quiet study shelves. So that's what we do. It's the space that we have. We just have to keep, reorganizing and rethinking how we provide services to the community, depending on where their needs are.
I would just say maybe, now that I know what the acronym is, minimum appropriation requirement, maybe we can redefine that for Felicia someday as the moderate appropriation, or maybe the maximum appropriation requirement.
Do you know what it is?
We know there's a lot of demand, and so, we're at the minimum.
Yes.
I'm just saying.
Oh, all right. Who sets it? Some
The state.
bureaucrat in Boston?
I would have said that. And if you want, we could call Jeff and he could explain it to you and he would
No.
say something totally different.
No,
But yeah,
that's
it's
okay.
somebody in some hidden room somewhere, I think.
The state.
The Board of Library
The
Commissioners.
Board of Library Commissioners.
Board of Library Commissioners.
Yeah, state statute though.
It always burned me that we put 11 million bucks into the building. I think that was the number, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago.
Something like that.
And that, you don't get credit for that. That makes no sense to me.
Isn't the formula literally 100 years old?
Yes.
They haven't changed it in 100. They haven't changed it in 100 years, or something really bizarre, right, Felicia?
Yes.
Sounds
80
like the
years.
rest of state government. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Felicia.
Okay. Now some fun. The recreation department? It's self-supporting.
I can't, no, it's more than self-supporting, but I'll let Ryan explain a tremendous amount of good news with his numbers. It's obviously one of the most popular things we do.
Sure, I'm happy to answer any questions, but we're just having a really good year so far. Revenues are off the charts. We got a lot of kids involved in programs. We have about
How many kids?
This year we'll have about 6,800 kids registered. So, and we'll probably bring in about 750,000 this year. That's what I'm projecting.
Yeah, 740, I think, is the number.
That's the expense,
Yeah, I know.
salary.
So if you bring in 750,
Well, that's this year, right? But next year, this is for next year, so I'm thinking we'll probably bring in more next year.
how many facilities are you operating around town?
All of them.
I know.
That's a good number.
Every school.
Nice
every
try,
field,
though.
Yeah, every
Ev-
school, every
ev-
field, Beaver, Fletcher, Palmenter, I mean, everywhere, name it.
He
Can
does
you
the
have
capital stuff, Nason Street Tot Lot, like all those capital projects. Ryan manages all those.
But you
too.
have enough, I guess, was where I was headed.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
make do, yeah, I mean, we could always use more, but we make do.
Okay. So that's the first department that made money tonight, so we're good.
You went by I didn't give you Kevin. Kevin brings in the most. Oh, he left. Look at that.
Oh, yeah, Kevin doing,
Yeah.
yeah, I get it now. Yeah, but we're, okay. I'm good, if anybody else is.
I'm good.
Thank you,
Thank
Ryan.
you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Brian.
Let's see, culture. Is culture part of Ryan's group?
No.
No, separate, right?
Did I skip by one here? No.
Oh,
Historical museum.
I missed the museum.
Yep, so the increase there is
Debbie would
just
not
to
be
make the part-time archivist for the museum full-time. It's pretty straightforward. And then I'm sorry, I should add one more thing. The minor expense, there's a professional, like we do with all departments, to be a member of the professional association, to have the training stuff, all that stuff is in the expense line item. And this is different than the next line item, which is the historical museum,
Wait,
the historical commission.
Well, let me, back to the museum.
Yeah.
Is the stuff she's archiving available online yet?
No.
No. Is it going to be? I mean, it
It's a
doesn't
good
do
question.
much
I think
good to
photos, I think eventually photos and things of that sort, hopefully. We're way a ways from that.
Okay.
We're really far away from that. We're just trying to get the inventory there cataloged. And for those that know the museum at home, go into the basement to get that functional. The vision eventually is to get rid of the kitchen, make that into another exhibit space, and then down cellar, turn that into another inventory space. We've got kind of a report from the state archivist on the to-dos. We just need the position to manage also more volunteers to try to be able to get in there and do a lot more work in the basement to get it organized. If you haven't been in the basement, it's chaos. The biggest problem is we just have people that drop stuff off. And we have an intake system, but we're not always there to intake it, and so it's just a difficult conversation with a lot of people of like, do we throw this out? Do we not? You know, is it important? Does it meet a threshold of what we need to keep? So, and also, as you know, the cupola, when you drive by, we have the resources in a capital account to do the project. We just need some folks down there to manage it so we can get that off, get it repainted, and bring it back to its original glory.
There aren't any records that are legally required to store, like town clerk or there. They're all here somewhere.
Yeah, actually, one of the recommendations in the report, which I know Rowan has already talked to Nancy about, is in the library, as a matter of fact, with Felicia, is to actually have a town staff working group to actually go look out and what kind of records preservation are needed. Obviously, Nancy has a lot of them down in the vault, but there's an archive at the library, there's an archive at the museum, there's one in the town hall here, so making sure we don't have duplication, because I can assure you there's a lot of duplication of annual reports and assessor's logs and all sorts of stuff, so we don't need to keep 3 versions of the same thing.
Historical Commission?
Same expense line item.
Yeah. Where are we going now?
Cultural Council, account 695, just, this is for 2 purposes. There's been a lot of discussion. One is this was seed money for the cultural festival, but in lieu of that happening, I I know they get usually 2 to 3 times the request for grants. So my guess is that the additional revenue here could be used for applicants, for local arts grants. Cultural District Committee, $696, just like all the other boards, $1,000 in expenses.
Are we at the end of the list?
Any questions on those? Otherwise, debt service and principals, account 710 is next.
That's pretty much fixed, isn't it? There's no, in going down, right?
Yeah, it's going down.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the big takeaway.
No.
Any questions, Carrie and Chris can certainly can explain how the older buildings are coming off the schedule and stuff.
Is this debt and interest include the stuff in the, 3.5% of the budget that we put in?
That's a goal.
That's I meant like
Yes.
the ladder truck we just bought, and the fire trucks.
Oh,
and
yeah.
that kind
Yeah,
of
that
stuff.
would be in that.
That's in here too.
That's right.
This is in effect total.
The schedule that's
Total
on the
principal.
screen that people are looking at home or using on their laptops, that's the actual debt schedule right there. Project by project, listed right out.
Okay.
You can see the fire truck, George, right?
Yeah, I did. I just, because that happened outside the normal capital. It became debt versus the old way.
Right.
This is the better way.
Right.
It looks like most of these are 10 years, that they drop off after 10 years.
I thought they were 20.
20 years, I'm sorry. What year is it?
So it's okay.
Most of them are 20.
We want them to
years.
drop off after 10.
Okay.
Yeah. No, mostly 20 and 30 years.
Got it.
It's just the way that you're only seeing 21 to.
Right.
No, that makes sense. So
Okay.
then a bunch dropped off this year because there are 03s. Looks like only one is 04. Because I know one of the concerns is once you lose it, it's hard to build it back up, right?
Mhm.
So,
Yep.
Okay, that's just
Yep.
good to know. And it looks like the 04 is,
So we
One
have
minute,
like two
27.
things dropping off in 24, and then a few more in 25. So this, but just for this part of it. that's
got it.
all.
And then nothing scheduled yet to add or on the
Nope.
table yet
I
at this
don't
point?
have anything.
Okay.
No.
Just the list, Natalie, that's been up on the screen for, police station, Remington Jefferson's probably really the next one,
Yeah.
which is pretty much a full rehab. I mean, roof, mechanicals, playground, like the whole building.
When was it, Bill?
96.
Long time ago.
So by the time we go out and borrow for it and start building it, it'll be 30 years. Fire alarms, I think, there's a whole bunch of stuff.
Okay.
I mean, we authorized with the support of the Finance Committee and the Council in 2020, I think it was only 3 million to borrow, because at the time we thought that's what the cost would be in 2019. I think that number's probably gonna be a lot more.
You think?
I hope not, but
Thank you.
yep. And then obviously the interest is on the next page. Why does the town administrator get stressed out about borrowing? 2.1 million in interest. Right out of your tax levy. Obviously some of these are debt exclusions, so you raise the money for it and it'll sunset, but if you go out and borrow without a ballot initiative with a vote of the community, you're on the hook for market rate interest, There are very few examples. The Beaver Street Interceptor is one, where you get a standard 2% SRF loan, but because we were a housing choice community, we saved another 0.5%, so it's 1.5%. That's pretty rare, in a positive way, right? But obviously this number here will go way up with any future borrowing.
Employee benefits?
Huh?
Wow. A lot of money.
Yep.
A lot of money.
And this is a good one. For folks at home that don't know the budget well, I encourage you to take a look at the benefits section. Karen's more than welcome to come up if people have questions, but we have an insurance advisory committee made up of members of all the unions, including the schools. We get together every month or two for most of the year, probably 4, 5, 6 meetings a year. We work as a team to talk about health insurance, plan design, rates, providers. As I think the IAC members know, and I know it's helped the school budget a lot. The introduction and the popularity of the health savings account, the HSA program, has really saved a lot. And I think in dollars, it's a lot of money, but more importantly, as all of you know, overall capacity in the market share of the tax levy, that's a huge savings. And I think, I think there's some data that Karen's put in there with the quantity of employees, percentage of employees. I mean, it's really risen up over the years. And so our goal has been the last few years is to try to maintain that. As always, we have a safety committee made up again of all the departments in town that deal with facilities related issues. The DPW's on it, the schools are on it. We do everything we can to try to maximize training and professional development. There's an award on the wall over there, actually, from Maya from a few years ago for maximizing our training credits. So we get an offset usually every year, 40, 50, 60, 70,000 from our employees proactively going out and doing a lot of professional development. And that offsets our workers' comp bill a little bit and our property and casualty. I just say those things as examples that if people go through the full budget document, they'll see other data in there that shows that we're not just like increasing these numbers a lot. There's a lot of staff work. And the school department also does a tremendous amount of work with their representatives to go back to their employees to try to get them and educate them on the health savings account program, and just a lot of other initiatives. So even behind these numbers, I have to say, there's a lot of work that goes on from the entire team. And all the department heads are phenomenal with this to try to save money, offset costs, and be really creative and innovative. So I won't really say any more unless anybody has any questions, but you can go in the budget document. Karen's here if anybody has any questions about health insurance or any of the budgeted items. I think the pension assessment, we have been working to try to get Norfolk County Retirement to come do a presentation at a council meeting or publicly. They are very challenging to get to public meetings, but ultimately at the end of the day, like I tell everybody, the pension assessment, the retirement assessment, right up here at the top, $7.5 million. 10 years ago that was half. It's all state law. There's not like a lot of local discretion, so it is what it is. And as somebody who worked on Beacon Hill for a long time, that's a boulder that is impossible to move. It's very, very hard to change those formulas. So
That one line item is 10% of the entire budget.
Yep.
Second largest department, I would guess, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, probably pretty close.
It's just behind the schools.
And schools and facilities are probably the largest. And the second would be DPW if you include all the enterprise funds. But if you
I'm
didn't,
looking at the 15 million. That's, yeah.
That's why I say some of those success stories, because it's a lot of work to continue on those things every single year. And the town does a really good, we do really do a great job at it. And the employees deserve a tremendous amount of the credit. They spend their own time coming up here after work to spend hours at those meetings. And, those representatives do a good job for their employee units.
Hey, risk management. I assume that's
property and casualty
insurance.
Yeah. Right? It's just the basics. Workers' comp is in the benefits budget, but
so that's just it is what it is.
It's fixed costs.
Quote a famous football coach.
Fixed costs. Yeah. I think that's it. We got one more.
The Department of Public Works. That one. There he is down there.
Do we want to all hear from Brutus?
the meeting would not be complete.
See, they like me.
Well, you showed up.
And at least you showed up. You just showed up at this one.
It's tough being moderator.
By the way,
Mr.
thank you for Sherman Avenue. It's working well.
It's finally done.
And the neighborhood behind, too.
Yes.
Really good.
No, it's long-range planning, you know, we did it piecemeal, and we got it all done, so you're welcome. Obviously, Jamie touched on a lot of things, I think, and you just brought up the important thing to remember about Public Works is, unlike most of the other budgets in town, we're probably over 90% of their budgets is employees, you know, their costs associated with Public Works. We're about 60% expenses. And you all know inflation. You know, we buy a lot of stuff. You kind of nailed it on the head. Our budget's about $15 to $16 million. So we're buying over $10 million worth of stuff a year. And we buy a lot of stuff, and inflation's gone up. I think we all know that. So that's been one of the most challenging things. You know, it's everything from, you know, purchasing chemicals for the water treatment to the parts for trucks, gasoline. You know, you saw the volatility with that. So that's the big thing for us. And then the boss also touched on the storm water, obviously, that's, moving. I think he did a pretty good job explaining how that's going in and it's going out, but it's actually going to the utility. But if you have any specific questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them for you.
I have just a curious question. You guys usually have on the website a this year's projects map?
We do.
Is-
I can't say I've checked it, but
Huh?
it should be up there.
I didn't know whether the 23 ones are up there. That's all I was curious.
It should be. Kate Schoberg, our GIS, she really handles that pretty well, working with the engineering department. So, if it's not there, we'll make sure it's up there. We try to keep it updated, but
I guess the people at home, as Jamie says, would like to know maybe what the major projects
oh, sure.
are going to be that are going to get in the way of going from here to there this year.
We still, the ones we were able to do a lot last year, as I think in town, we did a lot of work last year, especially high impact. We're still putting together our final things right now with, the capital money, but we're looking, and I hate to put them out there right now because then people get bummed out, but we're looking at doing sections of either Pond Street or Union Street, mill and overlay like we did to Chestnut Street.
West Central, maybe?
West Central? No.
From the cemetery to the, where the.
Oh, yeah.
That one.
Down
yes.
through there, that lower part of Union Street. And I think we've been doing sections of preventive maintenance of where we're at now on Pond Street. It's one of our major, arteries, so that's one of the major. Then we're gonna do, keep doing our crack sealing, chip sealing programs that we keep doing.
I figured he'd want to do some advertising, but I guess not.
Huh? Well, yeah, groceries coming out to bid. That's the, $2 million grant that, we're working on that. We're finally but it's so hard because it's like the lights were supposed to be in like last year and we're still waiting to get a traffic light out there, so.
The poles are up. I noticed that.
Yeah, it's just,
That goes to Kenwood Circle?
goes to Kenwood Circle. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And Ken was, we take you to the worst road in town. We got no money for it.
Like, here you go, well, Barron Road might take the cake on that one.
So, it's tough.
Do these guys want to say any other projects, Derek? Do you have any other things you want to announce, or?
Carlos
You guys good? Carlos?
Yeah, Arlington's being reconstructed right now. And Janie Ave.
Janie Ave Water. So Kate, I know Kate Soberg's on the Zoom call, but Kate will probably take a look at that map tomorrow or probably right now and summarize it and put out some social media posts.
The map is actually up.
Thanks, Kate.
See, I told you she was good.
She's great.
Yeah, great. Kate the Great.
But I will say the landing page on the website says 2022, but the map itself is 2023. So I'll make that update in the office tomorrow morning at 8 a.m.
Thanks, Kate.
No problem.
Anybody?
Is there anything that you expect, like I feel like there was so many things that went crazy during like COVID and supply chain stuff. Is there anything that you anticipate might at some point come down?
So fuel is, but that wasn't a COVID thing, that was more the war in Ukraine. So, we're seeing prices come down, we're able to lock in some, we're buying market rate right now, but it's obviously come down. Doug, with the chemicals, we haven't seen any.
Actually didn't see too much.
It's Doug Martin, he's the water and sewer superintendent.
Hey, doing? So we didn't see too much volatility with chemical prices because we were under contract that is going out to bid for this new fiscal year coming up. I do expect those to go up, so which is reflected in our budget. But getting those chemicals, unlike some other municipalities, we didn't really have too many issues, which was good.
Anything that will come down, you think? Yeah, I think it's.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say it. I think once it goes up, it stays up.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
All right, thank you.
The one thing that's interesting as far as costs go is recycling. The cost of getting rid of the recycling that we do. There was times where we were getting paid like $15 a ton for it. Now we're paying $100 a ton to get rid of it. It costs more to get rid of recycling than the solid waste that gets burned up at Wheelabrator. I know it sounds ridiculous, but you're better off throwing it out. It'd be cheaper. But that's where we're at, where the recycling's gone.
Did you just hear what he said?
Yeah.
Like I
I know.
Right,
The green in me didn't want to hear
that's
it.
like the worst thing to say, but people have to know it's true. It's just like when we said the percent that actually gets recycled is way smaller than people think. It's sad.
And we're one of
It's
the best.
sad.
And we're one of the best communities in the
We
state.
have the highest, one of the highest recycling rates of a town our size, bar none, statewide.
But see, we're paying for being good.
Right. It's expensive to be good. It's just a weird dynamic with markets, with trash and recycling, right? I mean,
And China closed their doors about taking the stuff back over there, so that was a big thing.
yeah. So I know that's not the message we want to send, and it's not how we want to raise our children. But the tough part is that it's what reality is. It's tough.
I have a curious question. During the stormwater discussions 2-3 years ago, when there was a discussion of that leaves was one of the biggest contributors to phosphorus, I think?
You're correct.
And that at one point you indicated that you were going to somehow manage to pick them up from the curbside. If
Correct.
I could get them to the curbside, you take them away. Not putting them in bags with a major sucking machine.
They are big sucking machines, and and we are that's something. It's part of the planning process, and that's something that we would like to do because everything's based upon credits. So when you start looking at what the value you get for different things, like the one I always go back, we banned phosphorus fertilizer, so we get so much credit for that. That really costs us nothing. So now we're evaluating what's the best option to get our total reduction in phosphorus loading. So we're still kind of in the planning phase right now. But once we get to that phase, and it's like, okay, we want to buy these big trucks, I'm gonna have to come to you. I know, but it's a fact of life that we have. We're gonna have to raise the rates, right? Which we don't want to do, but if we're forced into doing that, but that's why we're in the evaluation phase right now, trying to figure out the most cost-effective ways to do things. So.
I'm sure there's a lot of people who would love to see big, expensive trucks.
I like trucks.
As opposed to driving down and shoveling them out the back of my truck.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, done.
Long term, it'll happen.
Anything special, water, sewer, solid waste, stormwater?
I mean, I think as Jamie said, the stormwater is going into effect. It's a good thing now that the operating costs are going there, so it's freeing up stuff, and we're actually going to be able to
What's the
get that
potential
division.
income from the stormwater fee?
$1 million, give a little over money.
1.1 million.
Yeah.
But, I think this is, again, one of these things I feel like, in 2014, the town attempted to do an override for $1.5 million just for road work, and it got defeated 2-1 against. So, believe it or not, the town budget has never had a line item with roads money, work on roads, like this year. It's 600,000. It doesn't sound like a lot, because it's not a lot. But I just say this as context into we're still kind of catching up to the policies that have been trying to be put into place for 10 or 15 years. I mean, this is the first time we've ever had that much road money in the budget. I mean, for a little while there was like 400 or 500, and there may have been some others, and it got cut during recessions and bad times and other priorities. But road work's pretty constant. Sidewalk improvements, we have I mean, it's like the stuff we said earlier. So, I mean, I think in general there's some positive things here out of this, some huge positives that I think hopefully will have a big impact, but it's still not anywhere close to where we obviously as a community need to be. But that is one of the big wins out of this, out of the stormwater thing, is to be able to fund snow and ice, emergency operations, and road work, even in the amount it is. As all of you know, we do a lot with grants. I mean, over the last couple of years, we've gotten a few $1 million in grants for road work. We've had ARPA funds for road work. I mean, Chapter 90, the legislature has been good on that. They've increased that amount. We haven't gotten a huge amount as a result of it, but another couple $100,000 here or there over the last few years makes a difference. So we're continuing to piecemeal it all together. I think, as Brutus said the other night at one of the subcommittees, though, Barron Road, to rebuild that, it's like what, $1.5 million?
Correct.
So where are we gonna get that? I mean, so it's tough, right? We've even discussed having an OPEB style policy at some point where every year maybe we have to just increase roads automatically by 100,000 or something to make sure we keep up with it. And we're trying to devise some strategies on how to put some funds away for like a Barron Road project, right? And there's probably a dozen of those types of projects in town.
Yeah, especially ones that we take over. And I think, I've worked with a lot of you for a long time. We've been very aggressive in, our preventive maintenance programs, like the crack sealing, the chip sealing that everybody loves in town. But you see how much longer the roads last. We keep extending them out there. I use Barron Road because a perfect example that was built, the late 80s, part of it in the 90s, it was never maintained. The thing is complete junk. And you compare it to other roads that are built at the same time in town, they're still in pretty good shape because we're able to maintain them and do that. But now all of a sudden, we accept the road like we should as a town, was supposed to be. We go through that whole process. But as Jamie said, it's $1.5 million. $1.5 million to fix less than a mile of road because it has to be completely rebuilt. I can't crack seal it, I can't chip seal it, I can't overlay it, can't mill in place, reconstruction. So.
And we won't talk about PFAS tonight.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Huh?
Please don't.
You've heard him talk about it? Passionate.
That being said,
Yeah.
questions, anybody, for anybody? There's a whole pile of people out there. It says future agenda items. I think the agenda is the school committee on Wednesday night.
The superintendent of Norfolk Aggie is coming to the budget hearing for the first time, which is awesome. We're really excited to have Superintendent Martin. Superintendent McGuire from Tri-County will be second, and then the Franklin Public School District will be third. So you'll have an opportunity to meet and interact with all the three superintendents of all three schools.
I'll ask one more question. I always ask if we can see the Benjamin Franklin Charter School budget, and does it exist anywhere, or do they?
It's a great question. I know they're obligated to do an annual report. I know I can easily look that up if you'd like to have the annual report. I don't know about the budget. I've never asked them.
I mean, we get a budget. Brutus gives us one to everybody. But,
Yeah.
The charter school is kind of you know what I mean?
Let me look up and see what they have for the annual report, and we can bring that on Wednesday night and at least send it out to everybody.
Thank you.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
George,
Yes.
Natalie,
Yes.
Stephanie,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Chana,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
and Nicole is yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you to everyone who for coming, providing insight.